Former Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair and former Conservative Party leader William Hague have come together to jointly advocate for the UK to roll out digital IDs. Writing in the Times newspaper, they called for a digital ID for every citizen, a national health infrastructure that uses data to improve care and keep costs down, and sovereign AI systems backed up by supercomputing capabilities. In other words, everything that you need to know about our bodies and our lives, all on a microchip. Now, digital IDs are a controversial technology that allow people to prove their identity using information stored on an app. Despite small-scale uses, digital IDs are not universally accepted in the country in the same way that passports and driver's licences are. Blair and Hague are keen to change this, arguing that a government-approved digital ID card scheme would allow easier access to public services. But is this kind of technology a step too far and a threat to our basic freedoms and civil liberties? To debate this, we're hoping to be joined by political pundit and writer James Melville. But first, a good friend of the show, Labour Councillor Fatima Kamara. Hi, Fatima.
Hi, good evening, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Good to have you back on the show. Do we really want to have these digital IDs? It sounds like something out of George Orwell's 1984. I'm not sure I want the state knowing that much about me.
I think, Mark, what I would say is, in your intro, you mentioned about Tony Blair and also Hague putting this report forward in terms of recommendation. And what we must really just kind of stress, it's a report. It's a proposal. I think it's not set in stone, definitely because of the issues that we've had as the UK in terms of taking on board the notion of a digital national ID. The history behind it can also actually easily glare people up to think, no, this is not what I want, and rightfully so. I believe that with everything, there has to be due process and intelligence that needs to go with it. I believe that the report that Tony Blair and Hague have put together it's not set in stone. It's open for discussions. There are a lot of things that we need to think about in terms of GDPR. There are lots of things motions that would need to go through to Parliament and things like that. The only thing that I would have to add to that is that, there's certainly, we all do have digital footprint, that we willingly, one way or the other, giving out details, on social media or such like, which we have voluntarily given out our information to. I think the way that we're moving in terms of, keeping track of numbers of, for example, illegal immigration, people coming into the country, and also security of the nation. I think there's certainly a place for us to have a database that would hold certain information so we're able to plan, we're able to have the right system and infrastructures in place, both in the UK and also on a local level as well. In terms of the report, I would just say it's a report, it's not set in stone, but obviously I do understand how that makes people feel.
OK, well, let's bring in political pundit and writer, a man that's won a legion of fans in the course of the pandemic, speaking up for our freedoms. It's James Melville. We're having a little bit of trouble with the line to James. James, I hope you haven't been got at by the deep state.
Not yet, no, but this is Cornwall, so, all kinds of things of communication problems will happen in Cornwall.
What do you think about these digital IDs? Fatima Kamara says it's only a consultation, and really it's just a convenient way of having your medical information and your benefits and a couple of other important NHS details all in one place.
Whenever I hear the words security, safety and convenience, I question it. I'm not some sort of technological Luddite. I think, technology is the way the world moves forward. But I do have a problem when the likes of Tony Blair, who's effectively been wanging on about digital ID for 20 years, then appears, now unelected Tony Blair, to say that this is in our best interests. The problem with this is, where does it stop? I'm not saying we end up like China with social credit systems, but it does raise the possibility of a gateway towards that if we end up having a system of digital ID that is wrapped around a number of different areas, whether that be, we've seen it before with vaccine passports, that was effectively digital ID, and illiberal discrimination. And we're seeing it with central bank digital currencies. There's pilot schemes around the world on that, and there's consultation documents within the UK government on that. Digital ID can be useful in certain things, but not when it's a data harvest or it raises the prospect of government control and also surveillance. And so therefore, if you go down this path, it has to be scrutinised. We have to hold the government's feet to the fire, and there has to be certain restrictions from our side. And what I would say is that maybe based on the bad government, why are the government asking these questions to us? We own the government, they don't own us. So perhaps the best form of digital ID would be us to get digital ID to monitor the behaviour of our politicians and government so we know where our tax money is actually being spent.
The worry I've got, Fatima, is the potential for state tyranny over the citizen. James just touched on it. If we'd had these digital IDs during the pandemic, we could have properly enforced a two-tier society, the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. Things could have reached Canadian proportions, with people having their bank accounts frozen for being critical of lockdowns or not having the jab. That's the problem with this technology.
Mark, I think that I'm just preempting that I don't think that would be the case, but also not saying that that cannot happen. If we look at our neighboring country, as in Estonia, when if you're born in Estonia, you're actually given a national ID, and that works with you right through. Do you know what I mean? It helps with the planning. It helps with so many things that needs to happen in terms of getting the information online, getting them registered for prescription, and all of that. It makes it a seamless process. And I take on board the sort of anxieties and also the notion that why would someone want to know everything about me? Do you know what I mean? About what I do, what I eat, where I go, my passport details and all of that. But I do also believe that segments of these are already registered willingly by ourselves. But I think what the most important thing is actually the public having the say to actually dictate the sort of information that would be on this card, and if that comes to that point. But also, that is why with everything else, there's consultation. It's not imposed on us, as people are saying. I want to believe that there's going to be an aspect of consultation, and the public would be able to have a say to say, this is what we want, and this is what, we don't want our details, all of our details in just one national ID that carries everything that we carry around with us just because the government says so.
OK, James Melville, final thoughts on this, because I think if this technology was in the hands of someone like Fatima Kamara, we'd be fine, because Fatima has a conscience and an intellect and some empathy. But I'm worried about this kind of technology falling into the hands of a future authoritarian regime.
I agree. I mean, we've been down this path before with the COVID response. It started with 3 weeks to flatten the curve, and we end up with vaccine passports around the auspice of digital ID. And also it's about the communities who will be disregarded by digital ID. A large percentage of our elderly population are not online. So what happens to them? It's impossible to enforce across the whole country. I agree there's certain aspects of digital ID that make everyone's life easier. But there's certain aspects of digital ID that make people's life restricted. And I do worry, as I said at the start, whenever government, under the auspice of consultation, say that it's for our convenience, that raises a lot of questions. We're currently getting a lot of legislation that's bubbling under the radar that are around digital ID. And so most of the public don't even know about this. I've got a major concern for central bank digital currencies. That when we lose, for instance, aspects of financial freedom by financial transaction, that's a major, major problem, and the government should have no control over that. Our government is fundamentally there to serve us and free us up. But at the moment, we're getting governments around the world, it's not just in the UK, who seem to be using the wraparound of digital ID by claiming it's for our safety and our convenience. But actually, we don't know where that will end up. It's very vague at the moment. It's very ambiguous. I've read the documentation in terms of consultation exercises around digital ID and central bank digital currencies. But it does open a gateway to other problems. What else will they bolt hole into this? And so we have to be very, very careful that we don't end up in a situation. I'm not saying we end up like China, but it does offer the potential of a gateway towards that predicament. And that is not in keeping with what I think the UK is about, a liberal and free society.
James, thank you for joining us live from Cornwall. Enjoy a nice bubbly pint of Sharp's Atlantic Pale Ale on me. And may I also thank Labour Councillor, regular on Mark Dolan tonight, Fatima Kamara. A fascinating debate. Your reaction, digital ID, convenient or state tyranny? Mark at gbnews.uk.